Hi, everybody. Welcome to MeMA-Music's Voice Your Soul. We are very happy to have you here. We have a very cool special guest today by the name of John Gabrysiak, who has, wow, 30 plus years of entertainment industry experience. Let me give you a little bit of background on John before we get started. We're going to have a very interesting session today. John's going to talk about the business of music and, more importantly, about careers in the industry that sort of support the artists. Okay, so hi, everybody. So let me tell you a little bit more about John. John is a 30 plus year veteran of the entertainment industry. He's based in Chicago, and he has enjoyed a lengthy career that began as a booking agent for some of the most respected name in the blues industry, including Buddy Guy, John Mayall, Johnny Winter. His expertise transitioned into the world of experiential marketing, where he executed tour sponsorship deals on behalf of brands like Anheuser-Busch, Verizon, and Maytag for platinum level artists such as Tim McGraw, Reba McEntire, and Three Doors Down, just to name a few. As a production director, John has worked with national talent at some of the area's biggest and most well attended outdoor festivals, such as Market Days, Taste of Lincoln Avenue, and Lyle's Eyes to the Skies Festival. That's just a little of John's huge 30-year experience. In addition, he also has been an adjunct instructor, Department of Business and Entrepreneurship at Columbia. There, he taught a course called Producing and Touring Live Performances. He also was the director of marketing and sponsorships for Monterey International Inc. And the list goes on and on and on. So, what we're going to do is just bring John into the stream here and have him talk a little bit about how he got started in the music industry. Hi,
Hi, Jen.
John. Welcome.
It's good to be with you.
Good to be with you as well. So, I wanted to ask you first off, I started out in the music industry as a retail buyer for Rose Records. That's how I started. And I was lucky because this was a really long time ago, and I won't mention the year because then everyone will know how old I am. But I kind of just fell into it. Tell us how you started in the industry.
Believe it or not, my interest in the music business started when I was 11 years old. I went to my
Oh,
yeah I started I went to my first concert when I was 11. I saw Elton John at the old Chicago Stadium on Madison Street. He was already one of the
oh,
biggest stars in the world at that point, and me at the ripe old age of 11 went to the show with some friends and a parent, and I fell in love with the artist and just everything that happened at the show, all the sound, the lights, just the atmosphere of live music. So I got bit by the bug very, very early. I started reading Billboard magazine once I got to high school. Went to a lot of concerts when I was in high school. And then when I got to college and I got to Northern Illinois University, the first thing I did was sign up for classes. And the second thing I did was to sign up to be on the concert committee. So I was one of the only freshmen ever picked at Northern to be on the concert committee the first time out, and we booked acts like Frank Zappa,
wow.
Psychedelic Furs, Sammy Hagar, Cheap Trick. So that was just my first year of college, and I continued on doing it all 4 years.
Wow. So you said that you took a class. What type of class was offered at Northern Illinois University for the music industry? Because there weren't that many, a while back.
It wasn't a formal class, but we had an organization called the Home Center Board, and there was a group of teachers and advisors that were really, really at the forefront of letting students take the lead and book shows and go over contracts. You could work on the promotions committee, public relations, advertising, just
Wow.
any aspect of the business. But at the time, there wasn't a formal class. You had to wing it and get your experience where you could.
Yeah. Wow. That's so interesting. So I'm glad we have you here because things have changed. schools, universities, and colleges now are offering some really interesting courses in the music industry. And you, having all this experience working behind the scenes with so many major celebrities and recording artists, let's talk a little bit about that. We know that there's a team. There are key players behind the artists that really help out with everything. Um, what do you think? Can we talk about who the players on the team are?
Sure, sure. Every artist starts out with the dream of wanting to perform in front of people, wanting to make records, but it's a little bit naive. Just because you have talent, and there's a lot of people out there with talent, this is a career that you can't do on your own. So
Right.
it's best to align yourself with professionals and people that have experience that could help you save a lot of time and set you on the right course. And that begins with picking your team. If you really believe in yourself, people will come to you, or you can go to them. The
S-
first person you want to get is a personal manager, and I
Okay.
like to refer to the personal manager as kind of the quarterback on the football team. It's the
Mm,
person that calls all the plays for your career. They make all the decisions. They control the team, the publicists, the lawyers, the business people, the promoter. They're the jack of all trades. And the bigger you get, you'll find that you'll speak to your personal manager the first thing in the morning, and chances are you'll speak to them before you go to bed. So it's really a 24
yeah.
hour a day job. It's a person that needs to be the jack of all trades. It's good to have a law background so that you know what you're dealing with business wise. I know some personal managers that have accounting backgrounds, PR backgrounds. It's a people job.
Right. And I was just going to ask you that question. What do you look for in a manager? So obviously, it sounds like the more background a manager has in other areas, the more important that would be in regard to choosing a manager. Is that
Def-
correct?
Definitely. The biggest quality that you want to look for in a manager is trust.
Mm,
I could tell you stories of major platinum level stars that signed contracts with what they thought were good people, and they ended up getting robbed blind. They were family, they were friends, they became very close. Tens of millions of dollars were made, but tens of millions of dollars were lost as well. So sadly, we live in an age where you have to have someone that you trust, but you also have to have a team of attorneys that's watching out for the people that you think you trust. It's always good to have one hand washing the other, and they say both hands wash the face. That's kind of how it is in personal management.
right. So it's almost like you need to get the manager and the attorney at the same time. Because you
Yeah,
want the attorney to look over the contract that you're going to sign with the manager too. So it's kind of those are the first two. So those are the important ones. And it's interesting as we talk a little further about an artist team, how the manager kind of oversees everybody. So you get your manager, you got your attorney. What's your next step? Who do you look for next with your team in building the team?
one more thing I would say about management and entertainment attorneys is that these are very important decisions because they're very expensive decisions. Most managers will take 10 to 15% commission on every dollar you make, including recording contracts, when you sign an agreement. And a lot of these agreements are multi year deals. So you're not just signing someone for a year, you're signing them for the length of a deal or a 5 year or longer agreement. No one wants to get on the ground floor to build up an act only to have them leave you 5 years later once you become a superstar. And if you do choose to leave, and I believe this happened to Lady Gaga, when she decided to leave her management, he said, "Well, let's do this right. We're going to be friends, but you do need to understand that I will collect X amount of percentage on everything you make for a long time." So that's why the
Wow.
attorney becomes very important. And I just watched a special on ABC last week. I think it was about NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys. Their manager at the time, who these guys absolutely fell in love with and trusted, had they read their agreement a little bit closer, he signed himself on to be the sixth member of the band. So
Oh, yes.
he got a share of the as a band member, which is very very lucrative. And he also had it, wording in the deal that said, if you ever fire me for whatever reason, I will continue to get paid for a long, long time.
Wow.
Uh,
So okay, so that being said, the artist really needs to either have their attorney explain to them everything that's in that contract, because it sounds like the boys did not look at it, or they didn't sit down with the attorney and go over, what does this mean, what does this mean, what does this mean, because they clearly missed uh, him adding himself as a sixth member.
Correct. And I think one of the most breathtaking things I heard in this special was one of the guys from the Backstreet Boys said, we were one of the biggest bands in the world, and I couldn't afford to pay my rent at my apartment
Oh,
because the
wow.
money wasn't coming in. So yeah,
Wow.
it's something that you've got to look at really closely. And entertainment law is another very very fascinating part of the show business process. When you go to law school, it's definitely a specialty that you can study. There's contract law, so you need to know the deals of how label and streaming deals are structured. There's just contract law about deals for live performances. Law is a very very cool and lucrative area of the business, and there's always going to be a need for it. So something to think about. A lot of successful people in the business have law backgrounds.
Yeah, and so let me ask you a question about that. Now that we're kind of talking about an entertainment attorney, does the entertainment attorney also work with the publishing area of the music that the artist creates? So, in other words, is there a separate attorney that an artist should look at with regard to their publishing, or do you know if the entertainment attorney is enough for that? Does he cover or she cover all of that?
Some attorneys are jack of all trades, but I would recommend that you get someone that specializes in publishing. For those of you that don't know, publishing is how artists get paid on royalties. When you write a song, you get the royalties for that song, not your band, not your manager, but you, as the writer, get most of the profits. So it's very important that you have a legal person that knows the deal backwards and forwards of how the money will be spread out. I can't speak too closely to that. If you look behind my right shoulder, you'll see I have a gold record hanging on my wall. That was from an artist I represented, Johnny Lang. He sold 1 million
Mm,
copies of an album called "Lie to Me," and that was based on sales of vinyl and cassettes. The world has changed greatly, and artists are making all their money on touring right now. There's not a lot of artists that are selling millions of cassettes or vinyl anymore,
right.
but it does crack me up that young people are buying vinyl once again. I still have all my vinyl, but the business has changed. I think $5.25 was the cost of an album when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
Um, now you download and stream everything, so it's a totally different world, and you leave it to the lawyers to find out where the most money is.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we've covered a little bit of the manager, a little bit of the attorney. How do you go about finding these people? I mean, literally, do you just Google, record manager? Do you look at maybe like maybe some artists that you like their music, you maybe find out who manages them? What would be the route that you would take to actually look for both the entertainment attorney and the manager?
There's a lot of ways to go about it now more than ever. Young artists have a world of information at their fingertips through the internet. um, I still am a little bit old fashioned, and I'm going to give out a free piece of information. I really recommend that young people start to read Billboard magazine and a publication called Pollstar, Pollstar, .com in both situations. It's a great source of business information. Both of these publications, especially Pollstar, they publish um, management guides, booking agency guidebooks, so that you can buy contact information and learn who these management firms represent. It's like buying a car. You have to do your research on it. You have to find out who they represent, how much they charge, um, what they've done, what their background is. You meet with them in person, and you develop that trust level. With attorneys, it's a little bit more cut and dry. They'll charge you an hourly rate or a monthly retainer to review all your legal documents and to give you information. They'll do a review of your documents and tell you what the pitfalls are. They'll take legal language and turn it into everyday language so that you fully understand what you're signing, what the risks are, and what the benefits are. It's not all bad news. You know, some of these contracts are meant to protect everyone. So they're meant to protect the manager's interest and their time. They're meant to protect the performer, the songwriter, and then the business entity like a streaming service or a promoter. Everybody wants to be protected. You know, it's all about liability, which we could talk about for a long time in the business.
Right, of course. And that is important. And I think it just really boils down to really either looking through your contract on your own or, really sitting down with your attorney and saying, what does this mean? I don't understand, and pointing that out because we have heard millions of stories about artists who have been screwed over, so to speak. Okay, great. So the next on our list to talk about is the booking agent. Now, how much of that is done through the manager? That's totally handled by the manager? I mean, is it not a good idea for an artist to just go ahead and start calling some clubs and booking agents and sort of trying to do their own PR?
Not a good idea.
Okay.
Speaking as a former booking agent, I spent many years doing it, and I enjoyed it a lot. It's not for the faint of heart. The booking agent is responsible for negotiating your contract for live performances. So a booking agent will work directly with a club or theater owner, or in most cases, a promoter, Live Nation, AEG, Jam Productions, things like that. And they'll call up a buyer. They'll look at dates that are available. They'll look at venues that are available, and they put together a tour. But the most important part is the negotiation over the fee and the ticket price. So you want an agent who is looking out for your best interest, that's making you the most money and charging the fairest price for the ticket. You don't want to overcharge for tickets. Tickets are expensive enough as is. You know,
Yeah,
going to see a live act today can cost anywhere from $25 to $250. I've spent a lot of money on that. I've gotten into a lot of shows for free, but I spent a lot of money on concert tickets. So you want an agent that knows what your value is in the market, and more importantly, how to grow you, how to take you from the club level to the theater level, from the theater level to the arena level, and in the rarest cases, the arena level to the Soldier Fields of the world. It's a
mm,
very, very difficult job. It's a high level of trust. It's a 10% commission, usually right off the top. And again, booking agents, like managers, they're looking for long-term agreements. They're not going to spend years building you up as an artist only to have you leave. So again, it's generally a 5-year agreement for an act to get involved. And booking agents have the ability. It's not so much about um, who you want to represent you; it's who they want to represent. If you're an agent that has Elton John, Paul McCartney, Diddy, Beyonce, they're going to be very, very, very careful about who they sign on to that agency. They want to make sure that you're going to grow into a talent that is going to make them a lot of money. So it's not enough just to say you want to be represented by a certain agency or agent. You have to have the track record, and you have to be able to sign on to a plan that the agent sees for you. Now, again, this isn't all on you as an artist. This is where your team comes in, and your manager will know what size agency you belong with. If you belong with a boutique agency that maybe represents 10 or 20 artists that can really give you a lot of time and book you at club and theater level, Or have you done that already? And are you looking for a bigger taste of the business? The CAAs of the world, William
Right.
Morris Discover, the people that represent 300 and 400 artists at a time. They operate out of skyscrapers in New York and Los Angeles. There's positives and negatives to that, but just like managers, there's a wide variety of agents that are out there to represent you.
So let me ask you, you had mentioned that typically the contract is 5 years with booking agents. Is
Yes,
that is okay, so is that for developing artists too, or is that for, higher level established artists? What do you think?
it's
You th-
really about a relationship.
okay,
Most contracts start out with really strong language, but nobody wants to be stuck with a bad deal. If you sign an agreement with an agency or a manager and you're just not getting along, it's not worth it for either party to continue. A
right,
manager's frustrated and saying, you know what, I could be managing an act that's going to be going to stadium level in 2 years. Why am I stuck with this act that we went into this agreement with pie in the sky ideas? You have some good songs, but you just didn't take off. Same thing from the artist side. They'll say, we really liked this guy at the beginning and he gave us 110%, but now we're just not feeling the love. So but there's ways
right.
to get out of contracts, and sometimes it's best for both parties just to make a change.
Sure. And then another quick question about the booking agent and the artist and the manager. So ultimately, does is the decision still the artist with regard to the amount of days on the tour, the clubs that are going to be chosen, whether they're going to be small clubs or the larger venues, and of course, I know that's based on how well the artist is performing and selling music. But again, do you think the artist at least has the final say once the booking agent books the tour? Do you see that there's a lot of tension sometimes between the booking agent and the artist with regard to that? I'm sure you do.
Tension is a daily occurrence in the life of talent agents. I've got a pretty good number of gray hairs here, and each one has a different city and state and deal attached to it. But a tour starts out this way. Either the artist, if they're represented by a manager, will get on a conference call with the agent, and they'll say, John, we've decided we want to go out next summer. My act wants to do 40 cities. We want to do indoor. We don't want to do outdoor. We want to do indoor through the summer, and we want to play theater level acts, theater level venues. So the first thing
Okay.
an agent will do will get out his contacts and he'll start calling those venues. Or if you're AEG or Live Nation, you'll know what venues you own in each of those cities. The first thing you do is you put those dates on hold. You do a route: Chicago, Cleveland, Iowa, Indianapolis, Milwaukee, and you build a 40 city tour. And you take that to the artist and the manager saying, this is what the routing is looking like. What do you think? And you get a little bit of a yay or a nay, an early feeling, and then you go back and you start negotiating the performance contract, the deal. And that basically is going to the talent buyer saying, we have a minimum guarantee of say $10,000. After you make your expenses back, we'll share the back end deal with you 15%, and our ticket price can be no higher than 29.45 or $49. So the manager and the artist does have a say in ticket pricing because artists today are very sensitive that they don't want to be overpriced in a market, and that puts the onus on the promoter to to make sure that everybody's making money, and the promoter is going to say, well, look, I've got to charge more money because I need to make money. Right now you're making all the money, and that's a good thing because booking agents want their artists to make all the money. They don't want it to go to the promoters, and that's where the discussion points come in. And that's where the
Okay, so
fight starts.
yeah, hold on one sec because I do want to talk to you about that. But I want to go back to something that you mentioned. You mentioned just off the cuff 40 city tour. Is that typical 40 cities for a developing band? Because I would think it would probably be even more, maybe, because they would want more exposure. But what would be typical for a developing artist that wants to get out there? How many cities do you think in a year?
A 40 city tour, if I were a booking agent today, I would say that would be the bare minimum. If you're young, you need to get out there and play as much as you can. Don't worry about the money, cover your expenses, but get out there and play as much as you can. Now, the
Right.
reality of touring is that even though it's easy for me to say that, um, you're traveling in a van or maybe a small bus. You're staying at hotels every night. You're away from your family. If you're a singer, you're singing your heart out every night or maybe 1 or 2 days off a week. Even if you're young, that catches up with you. So a lot of tours start out with the best intentions and acts will go through with it. But if you have a good manager, they'll say, you know what, you guys are tired. We made some friends, we made money, but it's obvious that you guys are very, very tired. And that's one thing you don't
Mm,
want to do is wear out your act. When you get
okay.
older, like when you get to Elton John, Paul McCartney status level, they don't work every day. They don't work every other day. They'll work 2 to 3 times a week. That's very expensive because you're paying your crew. But it's all about saving your voice and it's all about your quality of life.
Right. That makes sense too. So you mentioned promoters. So that's the next thing. So talk to us a little bit about um, who is the promoter, because you could get confused sometimes with Live Nation being, an agency that has venues where you go to see concerts, but are they the promoter as well? And you could also say that the promoter is the record company because they've got a promotion department as well. So give us a little bit of a description of the promoter versus the booking agent, if you would.
Okay. The booking agent negotiates the deal, the financial deal with the promoter. The promoter takes the financial risk on the show. The promoter is the guy that's putting up the money up front to pay the act. He can make a profit on top of that, but he's responsible for selling the tickets, booking the venue, and making sure that the show is profitable for everyone. So it's a big responsibility. And my I've lived in Chicago my whole life, and when I started out in the music business, Jam Productions was the big local promoter. They owned some of the rooms like the Riviera, the Vic
Yes.
Theater. They promoted shows at the Allstate Arena, Chicago Stadium, outdoor shows, baseball stadium shows, a little bit of everything. But then back in I guess it was the late 90s, these big conglomerate corporations, AEG and Live Nation came in. And instead of dealing with local promoters, there's a jam promotion in every city, every major city in America, or there was at one time. But then Live Nation came in and approached these artists via their booking agents and said, hey, this is small potatoes. I don't want to buy one show from you. I want to buy 40 shows from you, and I'll promote you all over the country. And that was
Right.
just was a game changer because it meant more money for the artist. But unfortunately, it put a lot of really, really good people out of business. Think about this. Think if you were a promoter in Chicago and you booked a band since day one when you booked them at Cabaret Metro and there were 200 people there and you lost money as a promoter, but you believed in them, the records kept coming out, and you kept taking a risk on them and you grew them into the Chicago theater, and more records came out, and you made more money for them. And then they're playing the United Center, and you're all making buckets of money. How would you feel if, as a promoter, Live Nation came in and said, you know what? You don't need that promoter anymore. We're going to buy all your acts now that you're big and famous. And that's exactly what happened. Some artists
Yeah.
said, no, I'm a loyal person and I want my local promoter cut in at some level. This is somebody that's invested 15 years in our band. They grew us to where we're at today. And other bands just said, fine, we'll ace those people out. How much money will you give us? And again, that was a call that, the managers and the artists made together, and they have to live with themselves.
Yeah, right. Wow, that's really interesting though. So this is the other interesting thing. So far we've been talking about the manager, the booking agent, and the promoter and an attorney, and there's a cut that goes to all those people so far from the artist, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Wow. That's so this is, it's interesting, I suppose, with success, everybody's got to take a little piece of you, right? So a little bit more about the promoters. So the promoter's the one that's really taking the chance more than the booking agent. Is that correct?
That is correct. The booking agent will get paid via the artist no matter what. They will get
Okay.
paid 10%, whether um, if the show, they even get a cancellation fee in some situations.
Oh,
But
wow.
what's interesting now is that with the music industry on hold because of COVID, all of the major booking agencies are either shut down or everyone is working from home. The giant agency CAA announced that their office in New York and LA is completely closed until 2021. So all of their
Wow.
agents are sitting at home on their laptops, and they're probably representing their artists, and they're trying to rebook things into 2021. But this is the part that's really important. Those agents will not get paid until those shows play. So they get 10% of $100,000 guarantee, but they don't get paid until the show plays. So they can have $1 million worth of commissions on the books for 2021, but right now there's no guarantee if and when those shows are going to play.
Wow.
That kind of
Yeah, absolutely.
it's
And then,
very very bitter pill to swallow.
in addition, right now, a lot of artists are streaming live and they're trying to get, tips and donations. And of course, there's no booking agent or promoter that's making anything off of that because the artist is now doing that on their own. So yeah, this is very interesting what COVID has caused. I guess the only thing we can hope for is that when things get back to normal, if they do get back to normal, there will be a lot of jobs open in the music industry and available. So we've talked about the manager, the booking agent, the attorney. On our list, we have a couple other people that are key members. One is the label. And that's so different nowadays. When I worked for labels, it just was a whole different world. And a lot of artists today now are choosing, not to sign with a label. Um, Let me ask you, as far as, trying to get signed with a label, what do you think the benefits are in being on a major label as opposed to maybe like Chance the Rapper putting everything out on his own?
Chance the Rapper has done an awesome job. A lot of our Chicago talent has gotten done a really good job because they've taken advantage of social media, which we can talk about in a minute. But having a major label behind you still has its advantages, the labels that still exist, because you have a corporation behind you. You have a corporation worth millions of dollars that has a lot more promotion budget. They have full-time publicists. They have full-time people that could work your product and get it played more often, get you on the right TV shows, get you on Jimmy Kimmel. A lot of these things can be done by people you pay yourselves, publicists, social media managers. But like a manager, you can either have a guy that works at his kitchen table and can do a good job for you, don't get me wrong, working off of a laptop, or you can have a corporation behind you that represents a lot of talent. They have buying power. They have a track record of success. So that's the positive point of working with labels. But it is a different world now, and I can tell stories about the old days, as I'm sure you can, but it's just a different world now, and everybody's streaming, everybody's Spotify, everybody's trying to do things to monetize
Yes.
on YouTube. Um, it's a
Well,
different
yeah,
world.
it is. And I guess, the question really is for an artist with regard to, wanting to score a major label deal is how much do you really need the label these days? Because you just brought up something really important, and that's social media. And I think social media is becoming just, a boom for getting noticed and awareness. And there's your publicity, there's your PR department, there's your marketing department, there's your promotion department. Um, so talk a little bit about the impact of social media and how is there now outside of the label. I'm assuming that, and outside of a PR company, there's people now that just strictly, are social media experts. So you can actually just hire a social media expert or influencer, as they call them today, uh, and bypass labels. What do you think about that?
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about education in the same breath. When I taught a course at Columbia College, and I told this to you when we first met, and I'm completely blown away that young people today can get degrees in the music industry. You can
Right,
take courses about touring, you can take courses about entertainment law, you can take courses about putting a tour together, which is what I taught. But there's also a lot of courses in social media, and it's amazing. When I started out in the music industry, and I'm really dating myself, part of my job was to take 8 by 10 photos and put them in an envelope with a press release and send them snail mail to writers at the Tribune and Rolling Stone and the Sun Times. And then you'd
right,
call them and say, "Did you get the 8 by 10? I sent you a buddy guy. Do you want to talk to him for 20 minutes?" And now I can take that same photo and press release, I can hit a button and send it out to 5,000 people in 2 seconds and see what their interest level is of speaking to Buddy Guy. And then I just sort through what the interview requests are and where we can get the most bang for the buck. So it's a completely different world, but social media is fascinating. It's a great way for young artists to get their name out, and it's free. You don't have a full page ad in the Sun Times or the Tribune was $10,000 when people were paying for advertising. And you remember the days, when a big artist was going to release product, there'd be the full page ad in Rolling Stone and People
right.
magazine and all this media that we pick up at a newsstand. But now it's free. Now you release your song on YouTube. Now you do a free concert and you go on Facebook and Instagram and you do interviews and you go on Jimmy Kimmel, you do your tour, and the world is your oyster.
It's exactly, it's so true. Um, so another one of the other things that I wanted to ask you a little bit about. So we've covered manager, booking agent, promoter, a little bit of label, a little bit of streaming management. What about tour personnel? People that are on the road with you, and typically artists will have a separate manager, a tour manager. They'll have their own manager, but then the tour manager. Um, what does the road manager actually do when it comes to the venues and the tours? What's their role in all this?
As a booking agent, once a tour was approved by management and the artist, depending on the size of the act, management or myself would turn over the tour to the booking agent. We'd give them the promoter's name, address, phone number, production people, and then it's their turn to advance the show to see what we've gotten them into. We've negotiated the financial deal, the tickets are on sale, but the road manager's job is far different from the personal manager's job. The road manager's job focuses on logistics, how we're getting the act from point A to point B, what time we're leaving the hotel, what time we're getting to the venue, doing our sound check, making sure that our crew has food, what time we're doing our build in the morning, what time we're doing our tear down at night, what time I'm settling the show, collecting money, getting on the bus, and moving to the next city. It's a 24-hour a day job that you find yourself reporting not only to the artists who are living with you on the bus, but you're reporting into the manager on a daily basis. As a tour manager, you're responsible for the touring crew. So you're making sure that everyone's doing their job, sound, lights, guitar techs, drum techs, bass techs. That might be your job. You might have all those jobs if it's a small band. But if it's a big touring theater level band, you might be responsible for 4 to 5 buses full of people. If it's a stadium band, you see these tour films and documentaries with trucks, 18 wheelers with 10 or 15 tour buses. And there's
Yeah.
one person, one tour director or one tour manager that manages the whole team. It's a great way to learn the business. You learn contracts, you learn money, you learn people skills, you learn dealing with fans, dealing with the press, and getting people from point A to point B. It's a very, very, very demanding job. A lot of my friends are in that end of the business, and they love it. It's they can't imagine not being on the road, and that's why this COVID crisis is so difficult because there are literally thousands of people, road managers, road personnel, sound, lighting directors that are out of work right now, and these are good people that base their entire livelihood on the live performance of an artist, whether it's at club level, theater level, or stadium level. There's just different people. You grow into these positions just like anything else.
Yeah. And I suppose you have to have a love for being on the road all the time too, because it is pretty grueling. You're in and out of hotels and motels or sleeping on the bus or, whatever, 300 some days out of the year. But you're right. I think that that particular job, though, you really get to see a lot of what goes on in the business from all levels. The other thing too is I know that some artists have actual tour accountants um, that handle a lot of the financial stuff that's going on, and they keep track of what's being spent. Is that something that a road manager would do as well if there's no tour accountant, or does the personal manager uh, handle all of that?
When I first started out as a booking agent, we represented a very big blues act whose name I shouldn't mention. But what would
Please.
happen? The road manager would call in every day, and he would say, "John, I don't think this guy has the money to pay us. We're not going to unload the bus." So
Wow.
that was a big, heart-stopping, blood running out of your face phone call, and we'd call the promoter and say, "Look, if you don't hand the road manager X amount of dollars right now, they're going to get back on the bus and keep going, and we're going to say that you canceled the show because you couldn't pay our act." So they would
Wow.
scrape together whatever money they had, and if we felt good about it, we'd call the manager and say, "Hey, we got some of the money, and they'll pay us after the show. Or are we going to take a chance on that?" And there was most of the time it worked out in our favor, but um, that's how crazy it can get with day of show payments. It doesn't happen as much anymore, but that was more of a story from the old days. But to get to
Yeah.
your point,
Sure.
depending on the size of the tour, it is the responsibility of the road manager to get paid. Was a deposit paid? Is there a back end deal? Do I have to look at the ticket count and make sure that X amount of dollars came through the box office and we are due not only our guarantee, but due to the fact that we sold out this evening, we're due a bonus of several $1,000s. So it's important that
Oh.
you collect that money that night because getting the money after the show, after you leave town, is very difficult.
I can imagine. And so, oh, so there's bonuses. I wasn't aware of that. That's interesting. Is that something that's worked out between the your personal manager and the promoter,
It's worked out between the booking agent and
the
a
booking
good
agent?
good booking agent will never take a flat deal unless it's for a lot of money. You always want a percentage deal that gives you a healthy guarantee up front, but then once the promoter makes a 15% promoter profit and all of his expenses are met, the money that's left over is called the back end. And promoters
Right.
love that because they try to hide that and say, well, yeah, this is going to be a little bit of gravy that nobody's going to know about. But when you've got a tour accountant traveling with you, they know where the money is hidden. They know where to look for it.
Yes.
And a good tour accountant will walk out of there with 85 to 90% of that extra back end money. Now, the booking agent gets 10% of that. So it's important. The booking agent wants you to have a good accountant on the road because they share in that overage as well.
Wow, that's interesting. Okay. But that's another job too, a tour accountant. So that's really interesting. So then let me ask you this. We've got about 15 minutes left. I guess the big question is, how does Janet Jackson do it? Well, we know that she's a huge celebrity, but she does everything on her own when it comes to touring, handles the whole thing, her people. Um, do you have any information about that? Like, how do you have to be a superstar and make millions of dollars to pretty much run your own tour like she has?
More and more artists are becoming hands-on about their business. They've either gotten burned before, or they want to have their hand in every aspect, every decision that's made about their tour. The key here, and the reason why Janet Jackson, Beyonce, Jay-Z, the reason why they have these wildly successful tours is because A, they're popular and they sell tickets. But the key to any successful business is hiring good people. When you talk to people like Paul McCartney, Elton John, um, the Police, just giant bands, you'll find that some of their tour personnel have been with them for over 20 years. So they're able to put on these amazing shows because they have great people in place that they trust. They hire the best people in the business. Good touring personnel make six-figure salaries for working part-time of the year. It's a big sacrifice, but the people that do it are very, very good at it. And the people that work at stadium level are the best in the business. So
Yeah.
that's how Janet Jackson can have her hand in everything because they have great people that they trust.
Right. So you just mentioned something too that I was curious about, and I don't know if you can answer this question, but I was going to ask you what the salary ranges are for all these different jobs, or maybe you could say two digits or three digits. But what about a booking agent? And I'm sure that that's probably contingent on the level of artists that they're booking, but could we go through maybe just an idea of salaries for a booking agent, a manager? What do you think?
Instead of getting into specifics about salaries, because it's really hard for me to say based on
Yeah.
what today's wages are, I will give you this to think about. If you represent an artist that makes $100,000 a night,
Okay.
you get 10% of that. Your company makes $10,000 right off the top. So you book a 40 city tour times $10,000 a night, it's a pretty good paycheck. Now, please remember, some of these agencies represent 20 or 30 artists. Now, they're not going to be on the road all at the same time, but the more artists you represent, the more lucrative this business becomes. So, agents are paid a salary, but they're also paid a percentage based on how much they bring into the agency. So, if you're a good agent that brings in, you know, a few $1 million in salary, you're going to make a great living. It's not an
Yeah.
easy living, but you're going to make a great living. And
Right.
like the deals you're um, like the deals you're negotiating for your artists, these are guys that know how to negotiate great deals for themselves. But you got to have a track record. You start out
Sure.
small, you know the club and theater business, you build those artists up, and then you start negotiating deals for the big guys. And the next thing you know, you're living in a condo in Bel Air, California. But you
So
never enjoy it because you're working at the office and you're there at midnight trying to figure out why you lost money on a show.
yeah, really. So when we hear that, Drake, I think was the number one selling top concert, I think, geez, this past year or maybe in 2019, top grossing concerts. So when you hear something like that and you hear, 10 billion or something, 10% of that though went to the booking agent, right?
And 10 to 15%
10 to
went to the manager. So
10,
that's
right.
20 to 25% right off the top,
Yeah.
plus all of the expenses that you have to incur. It's the touring company's responsibility to pay for the buses, the food, the per diem money that's paid to the touring personnel, their salaries. sometimes limited liability insurance, gas for the just it's there's a list of expenses that's a page and a half long that goes into every show. So it's a lucrative business, but touring is also very, very expensive.
Yeah. So we've got a couple of minutes left. You mentioned something last time we spoke, and I'm going to quote you. You said, you always have to be ready to reinvent yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you mean with that in terms of, being an artist and wanting to grow your career.
I encourage young people that want to go into the music business, number one, to have passion, to just don't worry about the money, but have passion for whatever angle of the business you want to get into. And reinvention is very, very important because you may think that you want to do something in the business. You may think you want to be a booking agent, but then you find out that you're spending 60% of your day arguing with people, or you're getting an ulcer worrying about other people's money. But you tried it. You may think you want to be a personal manager until you realize that you have no life and that you're married and you have a wife and kids and your artists are calling you 24 hours a day. So reinvention is a necessary part of the business. You always want to control your narrative and tell your own story. But when something like COVID happens, it forces you to look at what you're doing and saying, I've done this for 30 years. What's next? How am I going to take all of these skills that I have, even if I've only been doing it for 2 years? What am I going to do to pivot and to reinvent myself for the next thing? I always
Yeah.
thought I was going to be a booking agent forever. I loved it, toured the world, got to know a lot of great artists, but I got burned out on it. And I was able to pivot and reinvent myself in the world of sponsorships, which is a very lucrative business for artists, brands, sports teams alike. So my point is, you always have to be ready to see what's next. You have to be able to take your skills and say, what am I going to do next with this? How am I going to not take too many steps backwards, but build my career, stay on track, and stay in the business I love?
Yeah. Excellent. So before we close, what's going on in Chicago with clubs? What do you think is going to happen? You think some are never going to reopen? Do you think the larger places will, but maybe smaller ones won't? What are you hearing?
Sadly, the music business is not built to survive on 25% capacity, especially at club level. If there's a club that holds 1,000 people, there's a lot of acts that would play to 200 people, but it's really hard for that business owner to make money, even if they're selling $7 beers. And you get into the whole social distancing thing and liability. It's really, really a tough question to answer. The articles I've been reading and the people I've been talking to is that many of these clubs are just going to stay closed until there's a vaccine because it just doesn't make sense for them to reopen and to
Right.
hire staff back at money they don't have. Like restaurants, unfortunately, the clubs and theaters that close permanently are going to close because they can't afford to pay their rent. Not every club owner owns the building they're in. They answer to a landlord, and the rents can be tens of thousands of dollars every month. Simple math, without any income coming in, you can go through your business savings and family savings very quickly. So unfortunately, I think that some of the clubs are going to be able to weather the storm and just board up for a while. Um,
Yeah.
Sadly, some of them won't. And that's why it's important that we get our congressmen and senators involved. There's been a lot of money paid out by the government to help big business. We need to help the music industry. There's a lot of good people who's built their entire careers on bringing live music to us, and they need help now.
Yeah. Well, I know the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events just created a video that's up on YouTube covering the song Sweet Home Chicago. And it's also, I believe, a place to donate for artists. And you're absolutely right. This is just incredible. Um, and it's interesting too, the whole vaccine thing. I hope that happens soon so that, we can all get out. In the meantime, I guess it's social media. That's the best thing that I'm seeing with artists right now is just performing live and streaming and keeping the exposure going. Yeah. So, anything else you'd like to say to us before we close out?
Be willing to try different things. Try every aspect of the business that you can get experience in. Call people if you want to be a booking agent. Call an agent. Get someone to befriend you. There's a lot of cool companies in Chicago that focus solely on music. Most of the people that work with them are very giving and they're good people if you can get their attention. Have passion for what you want to do. If you really believe in yourself, don't give up, and always know once you get some experience, always know what you're worth to other people. That is the
Hmm.
$100,000 piece of advice I can give you.
Wow, that's very insightful. Well, thank you so much for being our guest today. You were so informative, and informative when there is so much more to talk about for all of those different careers too. I mean, you just hit on the the top of all those different careers. But wow, we just want to thank you so much, and hopefully we'll have you on again, and we can go deeper into some other aspects of the industry as well.
I'd really like that. It was a pleasure being here, and let's keep our fingers crossed that this COVID crisis is going to be over, and we can all get back to going to see live music and concerts, whether it's at the club, theater, or stadium level. We've been cooped up for a long time, and I know that I am ready to rock.
Me too. All right, John. Thanks so much. Stay safe.
Thank you. You too.
Okay. Thanks everybody for joining us. Really appreciate it. This will be recorded so you can watch it at your leisure. Next week, we are going to have our special guest, Craig Snyder, who is a remixer, mixer, producer, lyricist, songwriter, and has worked with everybody you can think of. He's worked with Beyonce, Katy Perry, Bono from U2, Lady Gaga, the list goes on and on and on. So, thanks again for joining us. We will see you next week. Bye bye.